Welcome, my dear friends. It's horrifying to see you. Oh, wait, no, that's not how that goes. My dear friends, it's wonderful to see you. In case we haven't met before, I'm Stephen Clements, a writer, a gamer, and an appreciator of big brain activities in general. On this channel, I perform dramatic story readings. I provide role-playing game and movie reviews, and I get to talk to interesting people. And in this episode, I'm going to be doing a dramatic reading of a story from the first interesting person whose interview aired on this channel, and that's going to be the short story Horror in Arkaia, written by dear friend Marinos Anagnostopoulos, who you may remember from The Gift for the Goddess, both parts of the Monastery of Or, and our interview to help promote his charity boxing event that he did. As we touched on in some of those episodes, Marinos has written a bunch of really good short stories, and that short story collection that we threatened y'all with has finally come out. Maidens and Mayhem is volume 1 of the Man of War series, a sword and sorcery setting with all kinds of exciting stuff going on in it. In this first volume of the Man of War series, we get 9 short stories, and as the title might suggest, Maidens and Mayhem, a lot of them have to do with women. And the short story we're going to do today is no different. Women are the cause of the excitement in the story. So I'll tell you after the reading more about where to get a copy of this if you're interested. Let us proceed now into the horror in Arkaia. The Arcaian town of Nadiria was dark and silent under the starlit skies. The owls were silent, the river flowed quietly, and all of nature seemed asleep. The mountains surrounding the valley town looked down almost with anticipation. While most of the town was quiet, the square was not. 100 torches and lanterns lit the square, and the townsfolk prepared for a grisly spectacle. A beautiful young girl stood tied to a stake, and the same people who bound her now piled dry wood at her feet. Before the girl stood a silent chaplain with staff in hand. A black cloak trimmed with crimson covered his shoulders, and he wore the beautiful plate armor of the Excubitors, the Arcaian king's personal elite. A painted skull on his face. Atop his head sat the ceremonial hat of the holy men of Dio. Chaplain Dorn stood ready to perform his sanguinary holy work. 2 Excubitors flanked him, their swords planted into the earth before them, their gauntleted hands resting on the cross guards. Both wore their order's plate armor and winged helmets, and white cloaks flowed down their backs. One was a giant man named Sir Bardus, who sported a thick beard. The other, an old veteran named Sir Damian, whose gray hair flowed loosely down under his helm. The girl's strawberry hair contrasted against the dark-haired Arcaians. A thin girl with pale skin, she wore tattered garments, as of one who had suffered in a dungeon over the last year. She pleaded and wept, looking left and right for a savior to rescue her in this last moment. Fear and panic radiated from her eyes, and wet tears washed her dirty cheeks. The townsfolk looked upon her in pity, rather than in disdain. Some murmured that the chaplain had acted wrongly, making a girl who had suffered so much already suffer the fires meant only for the most depraved and corrupt. The plague had hit randomly, they said. Yes, it had taken many lives, but surely a better explanation than poor Lucia tied to a stake could be found. Rimius stood in the crowd, the closest friend of Lucia's father. He came not to witness the ghoulish show, but to find Lucia's younger sister, Lilia, in the crowd. Having found her, he tried to take her away from the horrific scene about to take place, but Lilia refused. As he tried to lead her away, she yelled, fought, and screamed. Not wishing to hurt the girl himself, he decided to let her do it, to inflict the awful sight that would forever scar her on herself. When it became too much for her to bear, then he would take her, regardless of the protest. He held the girl's hand as they watched the chaplain recite prayers before the pyre. Lucia had suffered. Her mother had been a whore passing through town with a traveling circus. She stuck around after the circus moved on, for Lucia's father had impregnated her. However, her circus whore mother disappeared when she was young. Rumor had it her father murdered her, but nothing was certain. Her father went on to marry another and produce 3 more children, a girl, a boy, and then another girl. Lucia never cared for her stepmother. After the woman contracted a strange disease that rotted her insides and made her beg for death. All matronly responsibilities for the children fell to her. Her father fell to drink and began to beat Lucia, blaming her for his misfortunes and for the death of his beloved wife. He was eventually found dead while townsfolk gathered firewood in the forest, his body mutilated as though attacked by wolves. With all responsibility for the children now solely hers, she turned to prostitution rather than seek the charity of any religious order. Remius provided the children with what he could, but Lucia insisted on doing things her own way. She earned enough to provide for her siblings, and she eventually brought her oldest half-sister into the trade when she was developed enough to perform the work. With her prettier sister working, she raised even more money to provide for the family. Unfortunately, one night her sister disappeared, never to be seen or heard from again. Although Remius had led the search party, they found no trace. The youngest children fell into despair. Lucia then became abusive toward her younger brother, who had always been disobedient. The poor boy went mad and ran into the woods. Search parties went looking for him as well, and all they found was this toy wooden knife, abandoned in the mud. Only Lucia and Lilia remained. Everyone considered the two girls cursed for their misery, yet they still showed their sympathy through charity. Although heartbroken, Lilia looked up to Lucia as a mother. Lucia provided for her until the town suffered a plague. That was when the chaplain and his paladins were invited to investigate. They seized Lucia and tied her to the stake. Remius muttered, "Damn these holy fools. Has your family not suffered enough already?" Lilia looked up at him and squeezed his hand. She held a doll in the other. Brother Dorn pressed ahead with his ritual, however scant the evidence for his current verdict. The unholy plague was too out of the ordinary, the symptoms too strange that a witch spreading corruption and misery had to be the cause. If he was wrong about the girl, then may Dio have mercy on his soul. Knowing they sympathized with the girl, he accepted that the townsfolk resented him. Deep in his heart, he felt certain he had been wrong about some of his previous victims, and for that, a bitter sorrow ate him. However, he remembered the death and destruction from the last time he showed mercy. Brother Dorn could not afford the consequences of a witch. He continued the ritual. Standing there with sword in one hand and torch in the other, Sir Bardas heard people in the crowd cry for mercy. Bardas considered it. Was this necessary? His task to light the pyre that would burn the wretched girl. He was not pleased with his orders. He looked at the girl, and she looked back at him in abject fear. Her eyes begged the giant man to release her, to save her from this terrible end. She closed her eyes and started to mumble a prayer. Bardas, who had been a butcher of men and watered many a battlefield with her blood, gazed on her pitifully. His heart ached as he watched. I am still a man after all. His prayer complete, a sense of urgency seized Dorn, and he shouted, "Light the pyre, Bardas! Light the pyre now!" Bardas hesitated, caught as he was staring at the girl reciting a prayer for her life and soul. "Now, Bardas, damn you!" Bardas closed his eyes as he lit the dried twigs and wood of the pyre. He whispered, "Forgive me, Dio." The flames caught quickly, igniting the pitch and pig fat that drenched the pyre. Ashamed of himself, Bardas opened his eyes to see the poor girl, still reciting her prayer as the flames danced and began to burn her garments. Meeting Bardas's sorrowful gaze, her eyes flashed with a golden glow. She smiled gleefully at the paladins. "Fools!" she shouted as she burned. "Did you think your silly rituals would save you from death?" "Bardas, Damien!" yelled Dorn. "Suffer not the witch! Slay her! Now!" Lucia laughed. "Too late, fools! Now pick up your weapons and fight! Fight and dance with the devil!" Bardas and Damien prepared their great swords to strike her down, but a sudden explosion sent them hurtling backwards onto the cobblestone square. The stake broke and fell sideways into the fire, taking the girl down with it into the fire. Lucia laughed. Some townsfolk stared in horror while others fled for their lives. A golden sphere appeared at the spot where the explosion erupted. "Ferog, my golden prince!" Lucia yelled as she burned. "I summon you! The square is your altar, and these fools are your sacrifice!" Those were her last words as Bardas beheaded her with a swipe so powerful that his sword lodged itself into the stake. Dorn fervently recited prayers as the golden sphere took on an anthropomorphic shape. A devil formed before them, its skin gold like an unholy treasure. 2 black horns sprouted from his head, and a pointy beard protruded from his chin. Sharp black nails grew from his fingers. The devil proclaimed, "Insolent fools! You have slain my bride, she that would treat me to those that were her own blood. You will all pay!" Dorn continued chanting. Chaos erupted in the square as townsfolk fled this way and that. Some men and town guards brandished weapons as they bravely surrounded the golden prince of some unknown hell. Ferog vomited golden flame, enveloping 3 men that came within striking distance. They screamed as they burned alive. Another charged and was cut down by a swipe of Ferog's nails, now grown into sharp talons. Sir Damien charged the devil with shield up and sword raised in the air. Ferog blew the golden flame at him, turning the shield molten with heat. Damien dropped it before it boiled his arm and brought his blade down where the devil had been, which proved not to be where he now was. The devil struck him across the head, toppling the ancient warrior to the ground with a broken neck. Darts and arrows pierced the devil, and he gave out a shout of pain and rage as he charged into the mob. Nobody was safe from the marauding demon. He hacked and swiped at his victims, drenching the cobblestone square with blood and gore. Courageous men fought him, but ended up dead or wounded. Accompanied by guards, Bardus charged, and Ferog braced to meet them with an evil grin. A guard reached Ferog first and thrust a spear at him. The Golden Prince grabbed the spear, pulling it away. He blew golden fire into the unfortunate guard's face. Charging with his sword raised, "Damn you back to your hell!" He swung his sword down, and the devil dodged with ease. Ferog would have speared the paladin if a man had not struck his thigh with an axe. The devil screamed in unholy pain, causing all around him to cover their ears, which began to bleed in their hands. He swatted the axeman like a fly, sending him across the square. He then skewered a charging guard with his stolen spear. Lifting the impaled guard up, he swung the dying man against Bardus, who stumbled while trying to remove his helmet, still resounding with the fiend's painful scream. Brother Dorn knelt on one knee, his eyes closed in prayer. When they opened, an azure light shone from them, illuminating the painted skull on his face. "Angels of Dio, guide my sword," he proclaimed. He charged the devil. With unholy muttering, the devil plucked the axe from his thigh and charged back. The showdown between Dorn and Ferog proved an epic battle. Dorn's eyes and blade shone with an azure aura as he fought with holy fury. The devil tried burning him, but his engulfing flames could do the holy man no harm. The men brave enough to remain showered Ferog with stones, darts, and javelins, as Dorn struck with staff and blade. With Ferog occupied, Bardus came from behind and cleaved his blade down into the devil's shoulder. Ferog screamed in pain, calling out to summon his brothers. His voice was put to an end, however, and his wicked brethren would never hear his call as the chaplain drove his blade through the devil's mouth. Falling back, the men held Ferog down, and Dorn drove his blessed blade through the Golden Prince's black heart. Fire engulfed the devil's body, and he disappeared as if he had never existed. Remius cried for Lilia in what remained of the square. People moaned in pain, while others wept over their slain loved ones. It had been Remius that plunged the axe into the devil's thigh. His own leg badly injured from the fall, he limped about the square, seeking the little girl. He found Lilia standing motionless, clutching her doll. The poor girl had been living with a witch this whole time, one sacrificing her own siblings to a devil. That circus whore must have been no better herself. Who knows what other evil she had left behind in their town. What a nightmare she had spawned into his friend's family. Embracing Lilia, he cried, "Sweet girl, are you all right?" Lilia stared at the carnage without reaction. Remius took her by her little hand, and they left the square. As Remius hobbled beside her, painfully, he said, "Come, my little girl, I'll take care of you. You can count on old Remius. I'll treat you as my own. I have food and treats and a warm fire at my home." He looked down and gave her a warm smile. His smile turned to horror as she smiled back with a golden aura radiating from her eyes. And that was Horror in Arkaia. I hope you enjoyed it, as I had to read it several times while working on editing it. Oh, by the way, I did edit this, and I had a lot of fun doing it because, frankly, I am a legit fan of every short story in this collection. I'm not blowing some false praise up your skirt, assuming you wear skirts, and if you don't, why not? Because when Marinos showed me some of his short stories, I told him, "These are good. What are you going to do with them?" He said, "Well, I don't know. I just have a bunch of them." Well, how many do you have? Like 20 or 30. So we collected 9 of them here. I read them umpteen times, edited them, and they're legit worth you checking out. So if you want a copy of that, they are available on Amazon right now. I'll have a link in the description below. And if you want to get in touch with Marinos, I'll have his contact information also available there. And in the interest of full disclosure, for every copy you buy, your boy gets a little kickback. But really, I just want more good stories to be told today, and this collection is packed with them. So besides this video, there'll be one other teaser reading I do from it until I do a full audio version of it. But that's going to be me straight up reading it like a traditional audiobook, not with all my hamming it up that I love to do here. I'll let you know when that comes out. And if you enjoy this little ditty of horror, I too enjoy it when people like and subscribe, so you know what to do. And feel free to share this around, particularly if you know someone into horror, fantasy, sword and sorcery, likes Conan, read Sonya, any of that kind of stuff. Spread the word, because there's modern authors doing good stuff out here. Well, my dear friends, that's all I've got for now. So until next time, I wish you nothing but the best. While Marinos wrote all these, I edited this. So if you find anything you don't like in it or any mistakes, well, you got two people to blame. And you're looking at one of them right now. And if you look at Marinos, you're probably going to see him in a Speedo. So do you really want to blame him when he's wearing it that well?